Board for the superintendent-president position. We thank our candidate and both of our groups for their respective, thoughtful, and diligent commitment to these important processes. As you entered the room this afternoon, you should have had access to a one-page document addressing Dr. Messina's background. And on the back, there is an input document that we would ask you to fill out. That will be collected at the end by HR representatives at the doors. Human Resources Office, once they collect these forms will be compiled for each finalist candidate and reviewed by the members of the board of the governing board as they engage their deliberations regarding which finalist candidate will be our next superintendent president. The format for today's 50-minute forum will be the following. We will begin by our finalist candidate providing responses to two introductory questions, which I will ask. This should take about 10 minutes. We will then engage in about a 35-minute question and answer dialogue based upon questions from you, which should be written legibly, which should be read legibly, because I'm going to read them, which should be written legibly on the 4x6 cards that you were given when you came through the door. If you haven't received either one of these, either the card or this, please raise your hand, and somebody from the HR office will come by and give you the presentation. At the end, after the questions, we will ask Dr. Messina to give us a 5-minute closing statement. So let us begin. Let us begin by asking these questions. Dr. Messina, given the qualifications and characteristics we seek in our next superintendent president, as well as institutional strengths and challenges we face, would you please briefly describe your background and how that suggests propensity for success in this critical leadership position? And after your first 6 months in this position, what criteria would you use to evaluate your effectiveness as our next Chief Executive Officer? Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kimberlee Messina.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I love seeing, can you hear me? Okay. I really appreciate seeing all of you. I do feel like I'm back in the classroom where no one wants to sit in the front row. I promise I don't bite. I'm going to go ahead and start by sort of addressing the parts of your job announcement and this process that really stood out to me and seemed as if they were resonating with me and why I applied and why I think that I would be a very successful president here at Pasadena City College. Besides all of the experiences and details that you mentioned, the things that really stood out for me were, number one, a very energetic, engaging and engaged president who is going to be a bridge between the Board of Trustees, the faculty, staff, and students, as well as the external community. And I really look forward to that opportunity. I have some experience with PCC. I served on your accreditation visit, not the most recent one, but the one before. And I know that actually since then, there's been a lot of different transitions in terms of leadership and in terms of challenges. And so what I would like to do is work with all of you to recreate what I think has been such a tradition at this campus, which is a rich and vibrant relationship between faculty, staff, students, administrators, and the board, so that we can better serve our students. And so that's one of the things that I think that I could bring here. Another thing that really stood out to me was the idea that with this amazing history of a college that has been here for nearly 100 years, the desire to say, let's move into the 21st century, let's be more agile, let's respond to the diverse community that has really changed since this college was first founded. And I'm a native Californian, fourth generation. I've seen the state change. I've seen the demographics change. I've dedicated 20 years of teaching to teaching Spanish at the college level. I've worked very much with the communities, the diverse communities, both the Latino communities, African American, Asian communities in my roles at the colleges. And I think the fact that I have that passion and commitment to serving all of our students, and I have those experiences, would be something that I would be able to bring to PCC. Another thing that, again, there are so many things that are in your announcement about your challenges, your opportunities, your strengths. One of the things that you all know is what a strong transfer record you have as a college. And justifiably, I know that you're very proud of that. And the desire to not only continue to increase that, but also to really get a handle on, as we go forward, what is the right balance between transfer, career technical education, community programs, and how we can best serve our community. And as you know, my background shows, I've worked not only as a faculty member, but a dean, a vice president, a president, and a vice chancellor. I have worked very closely with advisory committees, businesses, four-year universities, CTE programs, as well as transfer programs. And then I think the other thing that you mentioned, which you want to strengthen, although you clearly have a great base, is the relationship with the external community, getting out there and really engaging not only the K through 12 partners, the four-year universities, but also industry, nonprofits, and trying to really build some relationships that support our students, not only academically, but support our students with all of the barriers that they face that are non-academic. So trying to work with our community to help our students with food insecurity, help our students with transportation and housing issues. And I have a lot of not only passion for that, but experience in doing that as well. So I'm going to leave it at that and go to how I would evaluate myself in 6 months, and then I'll let you ask me questions instead of rambling on. 6 months is a short period of time, as you know. So I think the most important thing for me would be to say, in those 6 months, have I developed a solid working relationship of trust and confidence with the Board of Trustees and with the college community? Do I have those relationships? Do we know each other? And also that I have made inroads into the external community. That would be the most important self-evaluation that I would have. Also, I would want to look at where we are with the strategic plan, where we are with guided pathways, where we are with a lot of strategic programs, and see that I have been helpful and collaborative, as well as leading some of those initiatives to the next level. So those, I think, would be the most important things in 6 months that I would use to evaluate whether I have been successful. And now I'm going to turn it over to you and your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you some questions that are already coming to us from the audience. Audience, if you have questions, please raise your hand, and the facilitators will pick them up. But I have a whole handful, and some of you actually wrote really, really nicely. So I'm going to read those first.
Penmanship is a lost art, but not here, apparently.
So it says, describe a time when you've had to resolve a conflict between the faculty and administration, and explain your philosophy and approach to conflict resolution within the shared governance process.
Thank you. I think that my approach to conflict resolution is first and foremost for the parties to get together and to focus on what the real issue is. Oftentimes we get distracted from that. So whether it be an entire, a policy issue, whether it be a resource issue, whatever the conflict is, why are we having this conflict? Are we having the conflict because we didn't follow process, we didn't use our governance structure, we sidestepped that? Then the way that I would approach that would be to step back and say, okay, we need to go back and we need to go through our process. So if for some reason as an administration we had, someone had implemented something and not followed the process, that would be paused. We would go back and go through our process. That would be one example. Another example might be we followed the process, but there wasn't good communication. So the issue might not be what actually happened, but that people felt that they were excluded or not informed about the process. One thing that I think is very, very important is regular communication with the college community, and that includes face-to-face interpersonal communication, email communication, regular updates, campus forums if it's something that's a really big issue like the budget or some other, very large and very significant issue for the whole college. So getting people together, getting them to have a conversation, figuring out what the real issue is, and making sure that we are following our process. Now, what if we didn't have a process? What if the administration did something and there's no sort of rule against it, or it doesn't fit within our 10+1, or it doesn't fit within our governance structure? It could happen, right? Then what we need to do is say, well, wait a minute, what process should we be using? So we need to get back with our governance groups and go through and say, how do we want to handle these types of issues as we go forward? Maybe it was okay in the sense that that particular action wasn't explicitly covered or discussed, but we don't want to have those types of disagreements and animosities. So let's look back at how we could handle that going forward. So that's sort of my process, but you wanted an example. So I want to give you just a quick example so that I make sure I answer your question. One example that comes to mind is actually as a relatively new vice president, we had devised through our governance processes a completely new program review and resource allocation process. And so this was the first cycle of the faculty staffing part of that, and it was my first year as the vice president at that college, and the first new cycle. So as we went through to do the faculty staffing, there was a request from one department that was prioritized and approved, and then after the fact, it was the library, and the librarian said, oh, no, we wanted this type of position, and it was it was more of a supervisory position and not a teaching or a student-centered position. And I said, no, we, the administration, right, we understood it to be this other type of position. And so there was a lot of unhappiness, and they said, well, the committee voted, because there was a committee, there was a governance committee that suggested it. They voted, and we know we're right. And I said, well, let's go back to the committee. So we went back to the committee, and it made me feel good because we were all confused, because half of the people on the committee thought they were voting for one, and half thought they were voting for what I thought. So we threw it back to the committee and said, okay, here, what should we do? Should we just start over again? Should we, because I said in all sincerity as an administration, I don't support the non-teaching position for this particular thing, and they don't want this other one. So the committee came up with a compromise, which we agreed to live with. So that's just one example. But again, I think it illustrates what I showed you earlier, which was how I approach decision-making, which is very much in terms of process and communication and governance.
Thank you. This is a question about students. It says, how would you incorporate student perspectives into your decisions, policies, and overall work with PCC? What role do you see student athletes helping? What role do you see student athletes helping Pasadena City College with the new funding formula? So there are two student-related questions.
So the first question is, how would I ensure that student voice is a part of the decision-making process and a part of the governance? And I know, having been fortunate enough to visit this morning, actually, the student activities and student affairs area, that there's a very active student government at PCC, which is really great. But that is only a portion of students, and we know that. Not all of our students have time to be involved with governance, et cetera. So on the one hand, I would want to make sure that we have a place at the table in terms of our governance committees and structures for student representation. But a lot of times, students aren't able to commit to an entire semester or year of participating on those. So one of the things that I did at Foothill College, because a lot of the students were were commuter students, only 25% of the students came from the service area, and a lot of the students were also juggling things and taking classes online as well as face-to-face. So one of the things that I did was work with student government and the administration and faculty to set up an online process where students could be involved. So if it was some sort of like the strategic plan, something big, then we would have online surveys or online reaching out for student voice. But in terms of regular sort of communication, it was also making an effort to send electronic information out regularly to students, and also regularly to give them that opportunity to express input about things that were happening, not just your once every 3 years or 2 years SESI, but an actual chance to give some input. And that was really important because, again, a lot of the students didn't have time because of jobs or children and their education to be involved face-to-face in the governance. And it was interesting because the students really did respond well to that and participate. Student athletes and the new funding formula. That's a really good question. I think on the one hand, student athletes are full-time students, and if we're doing our job right, they are transferring or completing at higher rates, right? Because they are getting that extra support. They want to, hopefully, they have their goals either to get a scholarship and transfer to 4-year, or hopefully to potentially, engage in some sort of activity. I think it's really incumbent upon us, though, to make sure that student athletes are getting that support they need in order for them, not just for the funding formula, but in order for them to actually be successful. One of the things that I noticed when I was at Santa Rosa Junior College was we always would have a very large or larger than African American population in the fall, and then they would drop off in the spring. And I was asking one of my friends who was the counselor, I said, why is that? And he said, because football's in the fall. So students would come, they would do their student athlete, and then they would leave and then come back. And I'm not saying that that's what's happening here, but it is an issue to help us make sure that our students are student athletes, and it's not just athletics. The other way that student athletes could help with that is oftentimes our student athletes are from underserved populations, and depending on the formula and their economics, their success would then, on that 25% of the formula that is based on low income and or other factors, it could be of benefit. I also think that regardless of the funding formula, student athletes usually bring a lot to the community, not only to the internal community, but the external community is often very involved or engaged with the athletics program, which then hopefully will translate to support for our academic programs.
Thank you. This one was probably written by a manager. So it says, what is your stance on management and shared governance? What should management expect from your leadership, and how will you realistically demonstrate support for managers?
That's a really good question. When you think about administration, there's many different levels of management and administrators. And administrators are the least likely member of our community to get professional development opportunities. They have, they're not going to get necessarily the funding for that. There's also, unfortunately, not a lot of training for administrators. I do remember my first day as an interim dean, I got keys and an office. I didn't have a computer. There was no manual that said, page 1, first day as a dean, here's what you do. So I think in order to support managers, one of the things that I have done, and I would continue to do, is to ensure that they have the resources that they need in order to get better support for ongoing professional development, training, et cetera. Are they interested in advancement? Then how can I help them to do that? In terms of the governance process, administration not only has a role in terms of administering, but bless you, but we also have a role in terms of governance. It's very important that I've seen this happen in collective bargaining, and I've seen it happening in policy where, and I saw it when I was a dean. I had been an academic senate president, always involved in everything and very excited, and I got consulted all the time. And then as a dean, I would notice that they had negotiated something or that a new policy was in place that I had never heard of, and that it would be counterproductive to the success of our students. And so I was very frustrated. So I would want to make sure that there's a regular opportunity to engage with all of the managers, that I had that chance to meet with them regularly, to share what was happening, to get their input, I think that would be my answer.
Thank you. This is a two-part, well, they're all two-part.
They're all two to
two
three
and three-part questions. But, so I'm trying to take like questions and put them together so you folks will bear with me. So the DSPNS, the Disabled Student Population Community here at PCC, feels they are lacking certain academic services that other community colleges provide their DSPNS students. In addition, they feel that there are accessibility issues in many of the facilities that need to be improved. Will you as Superintendent President take time to get to know the DSPNS community here at PCC and work to address their concerns? And related to that would be, how would you plan to modernize or revamp the campus as it needs it, including technology, the needs for new technologies coming in?
Great, thank you.
So it's a two-part question. So the first part's about DSPNS students, but then it
about
goes
modernization,
into modernization
and technology. Well, in terms of DSPS, I think that even this morning I was actually having some iced tea in the cafeteria, and I was noticing a student doing, I assume, a research project for finals or for a class, and he was interviewing some students with disabilities and talking about issues of equity and equality, and I didn't get to eavesdrop on the entire conversation, but so I thought it was really a very rich, whichever class they're in, project, and it was really nice to see that engagement between a student in a class and students with disabilities. I would take the effort and time, of course, to get to know the community, both the staff and the faculty, as well as the students. One of the things that my son had a learning disability, and very smart, very bright, and I spent almost every year of his, from K to 8th grade, trying to explain to his teachers that no, he really couldn't do what they thought he could do the way that they thought he could do it, because they just said he's too smart. There's just, there's no reason why he can't, sit in his chair for 2 hours, or he can't do this or that. So I'm very familiar with that on a personal level. On a professional level, as Vice President of Instruction at Foothill College, one of the things that I did was work very closely with DSPS, because there had been a real issue of misunderstanding that instructional faculty were not always responsive to the accommodations that had been requested by the students. And that was normally under student services, but because of that sort of negotiation and relationship with faculty, it came into my area. And one of the things that I did was I asked if ever there was a conflict with instructional faculty and DSPS to involve me. And what I found was I would just call the faculty member, or depending on, if they were in their office, I could go visit them and try to understand what the concern was. Because again, I had taught and I'd had some unusual accommodations, so it wasn't that I assumed that every accommodation would be reasonable. I taught conversational Spanish, and I had a student who was deaf that was put into the class with an interpreter who didn't speak Spanish and was signing. So again, sometimes they don't work out as well as we like. However, most of the time they're very reasonable, and it's just people don't have the understanding of how to accommodate. So what ended up happening was the collaboration between academic affairs and DSPS really improved. Faculty felt that they were heard. The DSPS folks felt that they were heard, and most importantly, the students got the accommodations that they needed. So that's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and professionally, I have a lot of experience with that. The second piece of that was how to modernize the campus, including technology. Well, you know, I think we all know that, especially a college that's been around as long as this one, that there are going to be things that need to be modernized. And we also know that our sort of annual budget isn't going to do that. So it's certainly going to be working with the board to see where we are in terms of possibilities for bonds or you know, big sort of partnerships or donations, if we need large-scale items. If there are things that, like we get, you know, instructional, we get facilities, I'm forgetting the name of it, but we get maintenance money from the state and we get different funds, then it's a matter of making sure that we prioritize those in key areas, particularly technology, but also physically. I wouldn't ever discount that. But technology, going back to the previous question, not only enables us to provide instruction in the 21st century, but it also helps us to be more accommodating to people who have different disabilities. So I would want to hear, you know, from all of you where we are with those projects, what type of concerns we have, do sort of a analysis with the facilities folks and the technology, and see where we could go from there. Because in order to be a 21st century college, we have to have 21st century instructional materials and facilities.
Chancellor Eloy Oakley has come out with his vision for the future, and associated with that is a full funding of, well, at least funding, I don't know if it's fully funded, funding of guided pathways. In addition to that, AB 705 was signed into law, which requires the use of multiple measures for the placement of students into gateway courses. Tell us about how you how knowledgeable you are of those initiatives and how you would go about implementing them here at PCC.
Thank you, yes. Starting with multiple measures, the 2 years that I spent at San Mateo County Community College District as the interim vice chancellor, both guided pathways and multiple measures were things that I worked on with the 3 colleges in the district. Multiple measures was the first, and actually I think one of the most critical factors for success for our students. I come from I'm not a researcher, but I come from a research background, and I'm very much looking at what does the data tell us. And what it told us was that students were not being placed properly by just having a placement exam, and you just couldn't see that really was leading to student success. So we worked with the faculty, math, English, and ESL faculty, at 3 colleges to come up with what would be the multiple measures we would use, how we would determine, so for example, if we were using GPA, what would be the GPA that we would use? If we were using self-guided placement, what would be the types of questions? How would we evaluate that? And we had the opportunity then to look at it a year later and see whether the students who had been placed based on with multiple measures, did they or did they not outperform students who had been done just by the placement exam? And in fact, they did significantly. So the multiple measures actually led to academic success in the classroom, which then made it much easier for everyone. The faculty felt much better about that process, and we refined some of the measures. So that's my experience with that, and that's I'd want to work with, again, the faculty and the assessment folks here to see, and the VP of Student Services and Instruction to see, how we could, where we are with that and where we need to be with that and work on that. In terms of guided pathways, I am unabashedly in favor of guided pathways, and not as an initiative, and not because Chancellor Oakley is giving us money, and it's never enough money to be passionate about anything anyway, but because what I have seen is that students we'll do better when we look at ourselves critically and look at the structures that we have in place and how students do or do not navigate those structures. So I'll give you an example. As we were looking at guided pathways, we got groups together, and we had people, faculty and staff and administrators, we had them look at the catalog and try to select a major and see what they would take and see how their experience would be. And what we found was that everybody struggled with that no one was really that they didn't find the documents or the website very useful. And more importantly, some of the majors were designed or offered in such a way that students could not complete them in 2 years, no matter what, even if they were full-time. So again, looking at ourselves critically, making sure we have students using a student equity lens and saying, does it make sense that we have instruction and student services, that we have two sides of the house? Does that make sense? Do students understand that? Or do they just see a house? And do they want us, they just want to come in the house and they want to get helped, right? So at San Mateo, we had 3 colleges. One of them is now in year 3. The other colleges are now in year 2. So it's been a process. It's not a quick, it's not like you just sit down and 5 minutes later you have a pathway. The easiest part of that, actually, is for academic faculty to look at their curriculum and figure out how that aligns and come up with sort of meta majors, et cetera. That's actually not that complicated. Faculty are used to doing that. They know their curriculum. The more complicated piece is how do we all work together and how do we organize and do our communications really help students, or do they create an extra obstacle?
Thank you. Can you please tell us, oh, by the way, I used to be a high school teacher, so I can read most anything. But some of you are challenging me. Not this one, not this one. Can you please tell us about your knowledge or history of working with STEM students of color? How would you approach the district's commitment to STEM with Caltech and JPL in our district, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory?
Thank you. Well, I love that question. I am not a STEM person. As I told you, I taught Spanish. I'm a language arts kind of person. However, my first administrative job was the Dean of STEM for 4 years. And I worked very carefully with faculty, students, and staff in a great MESA program to not only provide high-quality STEM education, but to really work on diversifying STEM, particularly with gender. That's often it's a big issue in every area, but gender is a real big issue in STEM. However, where I really had the opportunity to, I think, make a difference, and where it, I think, relates to what, specifically to your question, is at Foothill College, where we had created what we called a Science Learning Institute, SLI. It was an advisory board, not for specific programs, not like an industry advisory board for a particular degree or certificate, but actually a group of Silicon Valley leaders, CEOs, retired CEOs, venture capitalists, who they themselves wanted to influence and diversify STEM. And so we got them together. They formed an advisory board for us. We met not too often face-to-face, maybe once a quarter, although we communicated. And we used them not only as a sounding board for what types of programs, certificates, classes we could develop to keep up with the constantly changing Silicon Valley, but we also used them, I wouldn't say we used them, we benefited from their money, frankly, and they donated over about 5 years, $1.8 million towards diversity efforts in STEM. One of the most successful of those was developing our summer STEM camps, which we did for middle school and high school students. We brought them on campus for a week-long package, and we did those for 4 weeks, so students could come for 1 week or 2 weeks, depending, how they wanted to. In the summer, they were fun, hands-on STEM activities, so involving math and physics and chemistry and all different things. So one group students might have been building roller coasters, and then they would win a prize if it actually functioned the way it was supposed to. Another group was doing robotics. Another group was, doing different things. But with that money, what we were able to do was to do outreach to the most underserved districts. We were able to provide transportation, breakfast, and lunch, as well as the program for those students. And for students that could afford it, we charged them. So, this is how much it would cost, but for students who came from families who didn't have it. And that was what the donors wanted to do. And obviously those summer STEM camps, the goal was not only catch them before they figure out or think, I can't do math, or I wouldn't be good at this, but also to make them think about Foothill College as an option, and then later to STEM careers. So I think this partnership is a great example. We also had partnerships with four-year universities and with the STEM programs. So I have a lot of passion for that. I think, again, there's still a gender and ethnic disparity in STEM that's been going on for a very long time. But yet the research and data show that if you catch students at that middle school age, hopefully with some kind of interaction, and then at that high school age, you can truly make a difference in terms of their interest and their confidence, which is really the key reason why there's a disparity in terms of representation.
Dr. Messina, you have an impressive background.
Thank
In your
you.
bio, there are references to acting in interim positions on your file. What would you have done differently to have earned permanent status as a vice chancellor or for other positions? And if selected at Pasadena Community College, how long would you plan on staying with us?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and I'm very appreciative that you asked it, because I know you're all thinking it, and if you don't ask it, then I can't answer it. So first of all, let's talk about the vice chancellor, my most recent position. I did not apply for the permanent position. I did not want to be a vice chancellor. I did it on an interim basis. I loved it. It was a great project-based job. I took it on with the intention of it not being permanent. I knew that I wanted to be on a campus working with students and faculty and staff. So my hope was that I would find my perfect home as a president before, right when that job ended. But I did not apply. So I was interim for a reason. They needed real help with skills that I had, and I, of course, enjoyed that experience, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I wouldn't do anything differently with that one. With the interim presidency at Foothill College, I loved being the president. I would have been happy to be the president there. And I did a good job, and the chancellor would say so, and I'm sure has in my references, but I was not selected as the permanent president. So I had to had to move on. That's what happens. So my goal is not to be an interim or to be short term. My goal is to find my home where I can stay. I don't want to be a vice chancellor. To be a president superintendent at a fine college such as this would be where I would want to spend the rest of my working days. And I'm not ready to retire at all yet. I did talk with your outgoing president, who is desperately ready to go, but I'm not. So, the fact that if you look at my resume, I spent 17 years at Santa Rosa Junior College. I spent 5 years at Foothill, and again, when you go for the permanent position and another candidate is selected, it's much better for the other candidate in the college for you to move on and find something else to do. So that's what happened. And in terms of the vice chancellor, as I said, it was a great opportunity to establish a district research office, to create consistent metrics amongst 3 colleges with regards to the strategic plan, to work with the board, a lot of really good things, but it was not what I wanted to do. So thank you for the question.
You're welcome. So this next question is like several of them combined that I'm trying to put together here for you, because I want to be sure that I try to touch on the ones that have been submitted. It says PC's student population is approximately 51% Latino. Its staff population is about 50% white. What would you do to bring more diversity to PCC for both student and staff populations? And What experience do you have working with and supporting free collegiate federally funded programs such as TRIO and other programs that deal with those populations? And let me finish with this. It ties it all together.
Okay. You're going to wrap it up in a bow.
Cultural competence is a value that is broadly shared at PCC. How have you demonstrated an understanding of cultural competence and applied that to your interactions with staff?
Okay, thank you. So cultural competency is, in fact, and we can, over the decades, we can call it different things. But the truth of the matter is it relates to being aware of and sensitive to and willing to engage in a positive way in a multicultural arena. And, I've spent my entire career working in multicultural environments, whether even as a student being in another country and being, having to learn the language of that country or having to learn the culture of that, working within a community that has, Southeast Asian students, other Asian students, Pacific Islanders, having Latino students, which is not a homogenous population either. I worked in the private sector as well, doing HR for a while, and don't ever try to say that people, just because they're Latino, that Mexicans and Salvadorans, for example, are the same. They have a very different culture. And African Americans who come from the South have a very different culture than African Americans who come from a different area, or people who come from Africa have a very different culture than African Americans. So I think first and foremost it's recognizing that, and more importantly, and that's the part, is putting that into action. So as a president and as a vice president, what I did, which also goes back to the diversifying of staff, faculty, et cetera, was work very carefully with hiring committees, whether it be for faculty or administration or staff. What we typically find is our staff is much more representative of our area, of our service area, and that our faculty, because they tend to get hired and stay until they retire, 30 years or so, the community can change dramatically during that time, so the faculty will not necessarily be representative. So when you get a chance to hire new faculty or new administrators, then that's where it's really critical that we think about what types of characteristics of people we want, and I don't mean their gender or their race, I mean be more expansive to what kinds of demonstrated skills and experiences do they bring that they can use to work with students of color or work with underrepresented students, and make sure that we are putting that into our outreach materials, our job descriptions, our job announcements, so that when someone who is an underrepresented person or comes from a different background sees that, they say, oh, this looks like someone is, they're interested in me. I think I want to apply to this because I have worked with students from these backgrounds and I have been successful at, cultural pedagogy or doing different things. So as the hiring manager, vice president and president, what I did was make sure that we looked at what we did and not just roll it over for the last 30 years and just kind of have your basic generic descriptions. But and when we did teaching demonstrations, for example, making sure that we tried to get people to, we requested that people do culturally competent teaching demonstrations. So regardless of what background you come from, you know that our student population is not homogeneous. So how would you approach teaching this particular topic to a diverse group within your classroom? So it's something that I'm passionate about. I also implemented required training for anyone who wanted to serve on a hiring committee that they go through regularly, and we set it up as a process so that we look at not just the law, what can we do and what can we not do, but actually, what types of questions might be unintentionally biased, what types of requirements that we're asking for might exclude certain people. So it's something that I'm very passionate about, And I have spent the last several years really being fortunate enough to be in a position to be able to implement some of those changes. The last part of that question was about TRIO and other programs.
Yeah, TRIO and other programs like that.
A lot of the, I've been more involved on the ground, on the academic side. So I was very involved with, for example, MESA, which is a program specifically designed for underrepresented students in STEM, in more math and engineering in particular. I have worked closely with student services, but I have not, administered like a TRIO program or other things like that. But I have certainly supported and worked with different types of grants and different types of like NSF grants and different things that were specifically designed to support different student populations.
Dr. Messina, we're down to about the last two questions, short ones, short answers,
Okay.
because we want to bring it to closure.
So only 2 parts?
No. But I got to ask this question because I don't want to be accosted by the data people on my way out. So it says,
Data people are very difficult.
how will data impact your decisions as president of Pasadena Community College?
Thank you. I think I mentioned before, and if you look at my background, I've supervised research for the last 7 or 8 years. And I think that the first and foremost, and data people will agree, it's the non-data people who struggle with this, data is not just numbers. It is not just number crunching. It's not being an accountant. It's not a bean counter. It's actually realistically looking at setting up the right mechanisms to give us the right information to see if what we're doing is successful, so that we know whether our efforts and our strengths and our commitments are making a difference in the areas that we want. So I do not think we can serve our students or our community without quality data. We need to look at that. We need to know if we're going to set up a new program, if we're going to set up guided pathways and we're going to set up, our processes, we need to at the same time set up processes to evaluate whether those were the right processes, because it's brand new. So, to the data people, I can assure you that I want and need and will expect good data. To the non-data people, that doesn't mean that, I do understand qualitative. It's not just numbers. It's not just, percentages or we must increase by X, Y, Z. There's a lot of different ways to evaluate data. The most important thing, though, is it's a tool for us to evaluate whether our students are getting what they need from us and that our community is getting what they need from us.
Thank you. And the last question, I try to get to them all, and we try to incorporate them. But the last question has to do with staff development, with professional learning, and what your thoughts are around that, how important it is, and how would you include the classified service in that professional learning?
Thank you. I think that professional development at every level of our institution is really critical to student success. And so as an example, my year as interim president at Foothill College, one of the things that we did was come together as a college to prioritize what would be the key efforts that we would use, the funding for student equity, student success, basic skills, et cetera. And we came up with, based on research, data, public best practices, that there would be a few key components. And one of those was targeted professional development for faculty, staff, and administrators in terms of equity and cultural competency. So understanding that that's going to look very different. So professional development for faculty they might want to learn more about curriculum and how they might be able to, devise programs or courses, might look at how they teach in the classroom. For classified staff, depending on their role, it could be a very different type of professional development. One of the things that, and we would be using, again, in that situation, we were using student equity and student success and basic skills funding. One of the things that often happens with classified staff is if we have a practice of only doing professional development on opening days or convocation times, classified staff cannot leave their A&R counter or cannot leave their job, because that's one of the busiest times when students are getting ready to start the semester. So we unintentionally would be leaving out an entire group of people. So one of the key things is to make sure that we don't just do professional development at certain flex days or times. We can do that for folks who have that opportunity, but we want to make sure that we have it. I'll go back again to an earlier question about the manager. One of the things that's really mattered to me on the statewide level is being involved in the Association of California Community College Administrators, which is just for administrators. However, what my role has been on the board, and then most recently I was president-elect of that organization, has been to focus on professional development for managers and administrators so that we can be more effective in working with students and helping students to be successful, and working better with faculty and working better with staff so that we can all serve our students better.
Thank you, Dr. Messina. You know what? You can take a breath now. Take a shot of water, because we've come to the close of our Q&A session, and now we're going to ask Dr. Messina to give us a short closing statement, and then we'll be through for this forum.
Okay, I got my water. I'm all ready. I just, again, would like to thank you for taking time out of what I know is a very busy time of year to come and attend this forum. I know how important it is to you that PCC selects the next president that will be the right fit for you, and your engagement here makes it clear that you're very committed to that, so I really appreciate that. I did want to just sort of conclude a little bit with, once again, why I feel that this is such a great college and why I think that I would be a good fit for you, as well as that you would be a good fit for me. One of the things that is really important to me is that I'm a first-generation college student. No one in my family had ever gone to college before I did. And I was very fortunate to have a friend who was a year older than I was, who actually told me that financial aid existed, for example, because otherwise I would not have known. And so I've had a lot of lucky chances, and I was able to get my bachelor's and was able to get my master's and ultimately to get my doctorate. And I don't want students to have to be lucky. I don't want students to miss out on what for me has been the most critical transformation in my life, which is education. And I know that all of you, by working here or being students here, also feel that education is such a critical thing. You're an excellent college. I don't need to tell you that. You know you're an excellent college. But one of the things that I mentioned in the first question was why I think we would fit well together, and that is that you're looking for some leadership and stability, and you want to have some continuity, and I'm looking for being somewhere where we can work together on a long-term basis, and we can transform our community, and I would be in that for the long haul. I think that the fact that we do have a diverse and increasingly diverse population here is something that I bring as well. When I'm out in the community representing this college, I'm representing this college in multiple communities. And so I would be able to go into the general, whether it be the Rotary or the Chamber or different nonprofits, but I'm also very comfortable with and very eager to get engaged in those associations and communities that are specifically Latino organizations that I can go in and I can, because of my history, because of my language, because of my culture, that I can help to represent this college the way that this college deserves to be represented in those communities. I will close by saying I was flying out here yesterday, and I sat next to a woman on the plane, and she'd had a very stressful experience, so she was very, very chatty, and very nice. But at the end, I was being quiet, but she was sharing, and she asked me, oh, so you live out here, et cetera. Finally, I said, oh, I have a job interview. Oh, where? Well, higher education. So finally, I said, I'm a finalist for Pasadena City College, and she said, my nephew goes there. My sister went there before she transferred to UCLA. She said, it's a great college. I said, it is. It's a great college. And then Charlotte said, so I just have to share it with you. Charlotte said that she thought I would be the right one. So I hope that you would agree with Charlotte. I really have enjoyed your energy, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Regardless of how this comes out, I am very honored to have been forwarded to this place, and I would really love and feel very proud to serve this college here as well as out in the community. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Messina. This concludes our forum. Thank you, audience, once again for your participation. And we will have another forum tonight at 5:30. So we didn't get to your question. We hope to get to it then. And we'll be using the same format. So we'll see you hopefully tonight again if you want to. And if not, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a...
Oh, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Oh, thank you.
How are you?
How are you? Good. How about you?
Wonderful, thank you.
I haven't seen you in a bit.
What's that?
You both in a bit. Where have you been?
Oh! He's alive. Where have we been?